A poor boy in a small village who works 17 hours a day in the fields, all for just one meal, becomes the owner of a multi-million-dollar company. That is the story of the founder of Hyundai, Chung Yu-Jung. Born in a small village in Korea in 1915, Chung Yu-Jung wanted to become a school teacher, but his family was so poor he couldn't study much. As a child, he worked with his family in the fields, but after the countless hours that they put in, the blood, sweat and tears, sometimes they still couldn't afford to eat, much less wear anything more than rags or get any medical care. Chung would go to the nearby city to sell firewood, and when there, he'd see that everybody would be properly dressed and fed, without having to toil in the fields for countless hours. This saddened and frustrated him. He wanted a better life than that of the fields, than that of the toil of the common man. One day, he read in the newspaper that a large construction company needed laborers at a nearby site. This motivated him to take action, and in 1932, at the age of 16, he made the surprising decision to run away to the city on his own. And one night, that's precisely what he did. He took a friend and went to the city of Kuwon, a 130-kilometer walk, and they started working as construction laborers. It was a hard life, with harder work and an even lower wage, but Chung was happy. He was independent and could lead some resemblance of a life that he could call his own, where he could earn money for himself and eventually make a worthy man out of himself. He continued like this for 2 months, with a bright future he could almost see, until he got caught. Chung's father found him and hauled him back to work in the fields. His family was relieved and happy to see him, but Chung not so much. These 2 months had ignited a passion for construction and civil engineering in Chung. He knew that he would never be able to beat poverty by working in the fields. He ran away 2 more times, but each time his father would find him and haul him back to the fields, until finally, in 1934, at the age of 18, he made his 4th and final escape attempt, and this time, no one stopped him. He didn't head to a nearby city. He headed to Seoul, current-day South Korea's capital. First a construction laborer, then a factory worker, then a delivery boy for a Bokyang rice store. Customers were so impressed with him that within 6 months, he'd become the store manager. Chung worked very hard to grow the shop at the time. In 1937, the store's owner grew seriously ill and decided to hand the reins over to Chung. Chung became the owner of the business. In the next 2 years, Chung worked harder and harder to grow the business. Everything seemed to be turning up for him, until World War II struck and Korea fell under Japanese control. The Japanese wanted extravagant amounts of rice supply for their army, a near-constant intake of rice, and they took control of all rice businesses in the country. Chung's hard work would fall apart. If I put my heart and soul sincerely into whatever work I am doing, I will surely succeed. Chung never lost hope. He knew that his hard work would pay off, and that regardless of how many times he'd have to start from the bottom, the top was always attainable. With that mindset and hope in his heart, he began looking for a business that the Japanese government couldn't put their hands on. He started repairing cars. He got a loan for 3,000 won in 1940, the equivalent of only $2 today in the US, and opened his own service garage. Just a month before opening, the garage burned down for unknown reasons. He was back to square one, but this time he had the trouble of paying off the loan he took and compensating his customers. He took another loan of 3,500 won. He built an even better garage, he realized that the main problem customers of his faced was the long time it took to get their repairs done. So he focused on speed. What other garages did in 20 days, he'd do in 5. His business was so successful that within just 3 years, his workforce had grown to more than 80 employees. He'd repaid all his loans and even resettled his family in Seoul. His business was booming till the next tragedy occurred. Japan needed to make war equipment and war vehicles for their army as the war was at its peak. So once again, they took Chung's ownership and merged his garage with a local steel plant. His business was taken away from him, but this time he wasn't back at square one. Even though he was forced to return to the village and the fields with his family, he had established himself. In 1945, the war ended, and with it, Japan's control over Korea. The northern areas were under Soviet influence, whilst the southern were under American influence. 1 year later, in 1946, Chung went back to Seoul to pick up the pieces of his car repair business. The same service as his old garage, but with a new name, Hyundai Auto Service. Hyundai meaning modern. During the time, America was building military bases in Korea, and Chung, with his still present passion for construction, realized an opportunity, and with it he formed the Hyundai Civil Works Company in 1947 at the age of 31. He began with small projects, but they soon began snowballing into bigger, more major undertakings by 1950. This had become his major business, until another twist of fate. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, and soon North Korean troops were beginning to surround Seoul. And with that, Chung and his family fled with all their savings to Busan, abandoning his business. But Chung did not give up. At the time, the US Army was fighting the North Korean invasion, and they needed tents, warehouses, and army headquarters. The Americans had no shortage of money. They just wanted a reliable, timely delivery, and with that, Chung formed a small team and adopted the can-do motto. Even though he had to incur many costs and losses because of the ongoing war, he would not give up. And with that mindset and ambition, he formed strong relationships with the Americans. The war ended in 1952, but Chung still maintained his work with them. As the South Korean government began to rebuild, they too needed to build bridges, dams and roads rapidly in the aftermath of the war. And Hyundai's operations were pivotal. The largest dam in South Korea, Soyang Dam, and the country's most important expressway, Gyeongbu, were made by, you guessed it, Hyundai. The 60s came. Chung at that point was in his 50s and owned one of the most successful construction companies in the region. He had built thousands of kilometers of roads. It was time to fill those roads with cars. In 1967, the Hyundai Motor Company was born. In 1968, he made a deal with Ford, in which he would assemble their Cortina cars, a joint venture that ran successfully for 2 years. But problems soon began to rise. Ford did not want Hyundai to start manufacturing their own cars. In 1973, Chung ended the partnership and began looking for replacements. He tried partnering with General Motors and Volkswagen, but to no avail. They refused. However, within the year, Hyundai partnered itself with Japanese car manufacturer Mitsubishi Motors. Mitsubishi had agreed to give Hyundai its car-making technology, and the best part of the deal was that Hyundai could manufacture and sell its own cars. Around the same time, the South Korean government issued an order for automobile companies to start developing citizens' cars, cars that had to be affordable, reliable, and using parts only made in South Korea. This was a perfect opportunity for Chung's new venture. In 1976, Chung set up a new plant, and Hyundai put out South Korea's first ever mass-produced car, the Hyundai Pony. The car was so successful that Hyundai was able to capture a 60% market share and become the biggest car company in South Korea. There was one catch though. The car market in South Korea only amounted to a total of 30,000 people, barely enough to make any profits. And although the Hyundai Pony was a huge success in the home market, it was a flop overseas. The quality couldn't compare with the big manufacturers in the US and abroad. The paint would peel off in the heat, and the car would frequently break down and face mechanical issues. Instead of closing down, he doubled down and began building a new factory that could manufacture 300,000 cars annually, 10 times the maximum of what the South Korean market could handle. Everybody was confused, including the company's top management. But Chung had an eye to the future. The factory was finished in 1980, and in 1982 they launched the Pony 2, fixing almost all the problems its predecessor faced. The car was a huge hit not only in South Korea, but also in Africa, Latin America, and Canada. In the coming years, Hyundai would sell more than 400,000 cars and would put itself on the global map among the top car manufacturers. But the largest and most successful region was yet to be cracked: the US. In the US, Japan dominated the compact car market, so Hyundai entered the market that had essentially non-existent competition, the sub-compact car market. Not only did they enter this untapped market, but they also realized that there's a huge gap in the second-hand car market in the USA. So, what did they do? They offered their new Hyundai Excel for the price of a second-hand car. Suddenly, the second-hand car market, who couldn't afford the newer cars or newer models, had a new unused car that fell precisely within their budget, and with a 5-year warranty to boot.
But right now, for the average price of a used car, you can get a brand new Hyundai Excel. Thoroughly equipped, never used, never abused, and starting at only $51.95. I suggest you pull yourself together and get down to your Hyundai dealer.
Second-hand car buyers instantly shifted to the Hyundai Excel, shaking the car market. In 1986 alone, Hyundai sold 170,000 Hyundai Excels in the USA, more than half their annual manufacturing capacity. In 1987, they sold 260,000 Hyundai Excels, and the Excel became the top-selling imported car in the USA. Hyundai established itself as a major player on the global market, and after that, Chung Yu-Jung retired at the age of 72, taking the place of honorary chairman and leaving the management of the company to his brothers and sons. Today, Hyundai is one of the 3 biggest car companies in the world. In 2022, they sold 3.94 million units. And what surprises most is that even though Hyundai's huge success could greatly be pinned on the success of the motor company, the Hyundai Group is comprised of 42 companies, including the Hyundai Elevator Company, Hyundai Technology, and the Hyundai Heavy Industries, the biggest shipbuilding company in the world. If you enjoyed this video, we have plenty others like it on the channel, and you might enjoy the ones on screen. Go ahead and click one. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. We'll catch you in the next one.